يا لغتي عربية حسبي بأنك منطقي وبياني عربية قلبي.
Been exploring Islam more recently, and like I said, there's a lot of it that's very beautiful, and its theology is quite a bit more clear than Christianity, where I was brought up, fundamentalist.
You put up as a Baptist.
Yeah, and so it was. Well, the Bible's full of contradictions and problems of that I just couldn't reconcile, and to a degree Islam has some of those things that I can't reconcile yet. I don't know whether they're irreconcilable or some contradiction in the same sense, but certainly it seems like a lot more of a lot clearer a teaching than in the Bible. I was curious, you say you could still follow some of the teachings of Jesus. Muslims believe in the Injil.
Yeah.
Is that anything that's written down or codified, or is it kind of an interpretation of some parts of what the apostles said according to?
That's a good question. And according to the Quran, the Injil, or the Gospel in singular, is something that was given to Jesus. It could be a book, a revelation, usually called a book. But it didn't be written down. It could just be like Prophet Muhammad received a revelation, but he didn't physically have a book. And that's not the same thing as the four Gospels that we have in the New Testament, which, as you know, were written by other people later on after Jesus. So Luke didn't obviously never met Jesus. So they're different. But what I have found is, I mean, like you, I've been schooled in the teaching of Jesus. I've read the Gospels. I know what Matthew, Mark, and Luke say about sin and salvation and forgiveness, and there's a remarkable similarity between that and what Islam teaches about exactly the same things. And how can this be? Well, I think this is not so controversial as it sounds, because scholars in general, all scholars who look at Islam and Judaism, they see that Islam and Judaism are very similar, actually. Both believe in the oneness of God, so he's not three in one, he's just one God. They don't believe that a human being has to die to forgive sins, that they believe that God is merciful. This idea of rahmah, the idea of the mercy of God, is absolutely central to Judaism's understanding of God, as it is in Islam. It's the same word, actually, in the Hebrew and the Arabic word. They're related. Rahman, related to womb, the idea of the mother's care for a child in the womb, the nurturing, supporting, providing for God does for his creation. And so Islam and Judaism, I think, are very, very similar, both in understanding of law and everything else. So it's not surprising that the Jewish Messiah, the Jewish prophet like Jesus or Moses would be very similar to what Islam teaches. You'd expect that anyway. To be honest, a priori, I would expect that. But what we believe has happened is that Christians today follow a religion about Jesus rather than the religion of Jesus. So instead of following what Jesus taught about God, and because Jesus referred to God as another person, not as himself, he prayed to God. He said he had a God, actually, in the Gospels. Christians now look to Jesus rather than the one he was pointing to as a centre of their faith. And the Quran says this is a big mistake, and so I think Islam is a kind of correction for some of the deviations and going astrays that we see in Christianity. And so Islam is a universal restatement of the truths, the spiritual truths we see in the teaching of Jesus and all the other prophets, actually, not just Jesus. And so it's not really a new religion, it's an old-time religion. It goes back to Abraham, as the Quran says.
The Jews have believe in a chosen race that's their people. So how does Islam?
I think Islam is quite. The Quran is quite critical of that. It acknowledges that God certainly bestowed many blessings and favours upon them by sending so many prophets. But the idea, this kind of ethnic nationalism or racial exclusivism, which kind of the them and us, is condemned in the Quran as not what God is the God of all people. He doesn't single out just one people uniquely. So yes, they were blessed amazingly by God, but the kind of nationalist hubris that has developed is criticised in the Quran. So they are quite critical of the people of, but there's not anti-Semitic. It's just the Old Testament itself, the Jewish Bible, of the prophets often say very harsh things about the people of Israel themselves, that they've gone astray and they oppress the widows, and so there's often quite harsh words said by the Jewish prophets about the Israelites themselves there. So have you, apart from the Quran, what, are you reading any other literature or books on Islam at all?
I've mostly been watching videos from Speaker's Corner and there's some Islamic sort of expositions, like watching stuff about the creation story from Islam. It's just very interesting, the idea that the humans were created separately from everything else, from specks of dust collected from all over the world, or something like that. Or Adam was. So
the Quran is different from the way it talks about the world. It's quite different from modern science, and obviously, because it talks about an unseen realm, which is beyond obviously empirical observation, because science is to do with what we can quantify, measure, and repeat in experiments. So it talks about an unseen realm where there are angels, where there's jinn, there's where God somehow intersects with our material world from what is to us the unseen realm. So there are these various dimensions that exist, that really truly exist beyond what we can perceive with our senses, and is absolutely key to the Quran's perception of reality. So theories of evolution or any kind of scientific hypothesis is incomplete to the extent that it doesn't also acknowledge the biggest picture, the big picture of all, which is the creator God, the uncaused cause of all that is. And I mean, science at its best doesn't claim to have the omnicompetence anyway. It just says, look, we're looking at what we can see. But if some people become what I call scientistic, they become ideological in their insistence that only what is observable through science is real, then that's where the Quran says no, because there are, to us, unseen realms where reality somehow impinges on this reality in a very real way. And the Quran is waking us up to that reality. It's saying, look, pay attention to the unseen, to God's action in the world. And that for me is such an important message in the Quran, because it's a reality check that there's more going on than we perceive.
Definitely is more going on than any of us can see. It's just that's one of the things that I still have an issue with in the Quran. It does talk about angels and jinn, and these are beings that can interact with us and seemingly affect our behaviour without us knowing about it or being aware. How does everyone go about living a life like that, like believing that there are like thousands of little voices whispering in your ear, do this, do that, do this?
I'm not sure it's 1,000 voices. The angel.
It's a metaphor, and I don't know exactly.
I think the angels are there as our guardian angels, and we take it. I take it on faith. It's not, let me show you an angel. It's over there. It's as on faith, because we believe the Quran is the word of God, and it's an authentic and true revelation of that. So I believe on faith that it's the case. I think there are indirect corroborations for the kinds of things that Quran talks about in the unseen realm, but it is ultimately a matter of faith. So we believe it because it's been revealed to us by someone who does know truly and reliably, i.e. God himself through the prophets and messengers. And for me, the spiritual authentication of the Quran comes from its correspondence to what I had always believed as a Christian, which is the teaching of Jesus. I see a spiritual continuity between the two. If the Quran was very different from what I knew from the teaching of Jesus, then I'd say, hang on, this doesn't smell right. But it does actually. So I had to come to that point. Well, if I believe Jesus was sent by God, then by what right do I have to deny Muhammad was sent by God? Because it's the same message, really, except that Muhammad said he was sent to all of the world, whereas Jesus said, at least in the Gospels, I've been only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel in Matthew 15. So Jesus never claimed to be a global messenger, whereas Muhammad did, and so the final messenger of God.
So, do you have any questions to me?
Yeah, why are you an atheist?
I guess because I thought from Christianity, my upbringing, I couldn't reconcile a lot of what I saw as contradictions in the Bible, the sort of understanding how the Bible was constructed and put together. It didn't form in my head a consistent message. It seemed to be completely man-made and fabricated, that there was a guy named Jesus who went around saying, be nice to each other a bit more. And then you had the Bible, and you have people standing up here screaming that you're all going to burn in hell for eternity if you don't follow the words of God. And
it says more about him than Jesus.
It's not a pleasant message, and I just rejected that and found that I'd stopped believing in that at all, and so the next step was just stop believing in God. I don't think I really resonated necessarily with the teachings of Jesus as such. I mean, they were just taught to me in such a muddled and contradictory way that I never understood them. That's where I am now.
So if you could reconnect with a faith tradition that didn't have those problems that you'd seen in that religion, then there would be a chance for faith to be rekindled again.
Maybe. I don't know.
At least you're open to that possibility.
It's every possibility. I think faith is I always believe that everything is a necessity. That all ideas and all things at some point have to be thought of or conceived somewhere or someplace. I think you can't reject faith just because it seems epistemologically unfounded.
I think that there is faith in the dictionary definition, which is almost like just blind faith without any reason, and then there's reasonable faith which is based on an understanding of evidence, and I think it's the latter that the Quran appeals to, a reason-based faith.
Yeah, it's like reason will get you this far, but you have to have faith to get the last step, as it were, rather than it being, I'm just going to accept all of this without any evidence at all. I've got all this evidence that suggests this to me, and I'm going to trust that I've made the right decision based on what I've seen. Whereas, the definition of
it's also in Islam
is a conclusion come to without evidence and defended against all evidence or something. It's the
epigram. Yes. We came up with that. It sounds like Richard Dawkins might have said that or something.
It's a guy called Aaron Ra, I think.
Sounds very familiar.
He's head of the American Atheists, or was for years.
I think we have faith about virtually everything we do in our lives. I mean, I have faith that I really am here now. I have faith that my parents really are my parents, and it's not some kind of hoax. I have faith that blah blah, and go on and on. These are not, in a philosophical sense, demonstrable, because I can't prove that I'm really. Do you know what I mean? I could it's solipsism, as you know. This could just be an evil genius projecting these images in my mind. I could be asleep in bed. So there is faith, even on this very mundane level, that in fact the universe is pretty ordered and regular, and that we are really here, and that I can trust that certain things will be the case even tomorrow. There is that element of faith there. So I don't think it's just the realm of faith is separate from the realm of every day. I think there is as you say, epistemologically, an element of faith in all that we do, just to get on with life.
That was the last comment I made to you when I was here last time talking to Sir. I made some comment about that's the only way that we know things is through reason, I was talking about Kant or something, and you made some comment that no, that's not true, and you say read this or something, and I forgot what you'd said.
Kant refuted the rationalism that was kind of there in Descartes, and he also disagreed with the empiricism of Hume, and he came up with a kind of Kantian position, which kind of synthetic a priori thing, which is so blah blah blah. That's a different subject, but
It relates back to knowledge, how we know, and what we know, and faith, and then so it's like in some absolute sense, I don't know you're there, but I have absolute faith that you are there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed, because we have to get on with our lives. Otherwise, we'd go mad and just end up in a lunatic asylum. No, I agree. I have faith in that sense that the beauty and the order and the intelligibility of the universe is not a product of blind forces, but actually is, in some sense, the fruit of the creator's activity, continuing activity, sustain the universe in being. Is this a sweetie? Oh no, it's a.
Take care as you wish.
So I have faith, if you like. It's more there's something slightly different about Islam than Christianity or religion, as it's seen. Islam tends to talk more about the certainty of belief. I know this is not very what we're saying, but we don't tend to walk around thinking, I hope it's true. We kind of think the universe itself contains the signs of God's creatorly activity, his care and his love and his extraordinary artistry and his mathematical fine-tuning of the law, all this stuff. And that for us are signs of God himself as the uncaused cause of all that exists. He's not an object in the universe. He is the reason the universe exists at all. And he didn't just live the universe just to get on with it. He continues to sustain it in being. So the laws of physics, if they are laws, they are his laws. So they are laws that he continues to bring into existence every moment. So intellectually, I don't have a problem with the idea of God's existence in that sense at all. It's quite a holistic picture. It gives to all of reality a meaning and character, which is convincing in the way that a nihilist explanation where it's just random and meaningless doesn't make sense to me.
I've been down that road, the nihilistic route. But no, it's self-evident that as a creature, I'm a being, I have meaning, I have feelings that are real, independent of whether you think they are or not, or whatever you feel them and experience them. And there does seem to be a metric innate within those feelings, that something feels painful, and that's the experience of pain, and it's shared, and so those feelings are translatable to other people. So I sort of reject the sort of nihilistic meaninglessness of it. Meaning is inherent in being, and animals experience the same things too. Maybe not to the same rational degree.
I think for me, Islam, and many Muslims say that Islam is natural to the human heart. It's not something that alien.
That was an interesting concept, because
it's not
Islam as reverts. Rather than
that's a horrible expression. That sounds like a medical condition. I've got revertitis. Oh my God, doctor.
Whereas, from my perspective, I would say that everyone was atheist before they were Muslim, because prior to having a soul, or even in the Muslim tradition, your soul is assigned to you at a certain number of days after you're born, and in that period, you would be considered atheist before you were given a Muslim soul.
It would be considered properly human being. You'll be a human being until you're an ensouled human being. Before that, you are just bits and pieces of matter, I suppose. But I think we are, as a species, hardwired to believe in God. I think there was some research a couple of years ago at Oxford University by some psychologists that came to that conclusion, that we seem to be, as a species, naturally believers in God. I know they're atheists now, but this seems to be the way that people just naturally believe. And perhaps later on then they come to disbelieve, like you did, as a result of disappointment in the Baptist view of the Bible and so on, which is understandable. But Islam itself strikes me as being quite natural to man. It sort of sits in the heart very naturally. The idea of the oneness of God. So you don't believe that God died on the cross, for example. God doesn't die. He's the eternal, uncaused cause of all being. We don't have to believe that God sent a man to be horribly crucified just so God can forgive our sins. And we don't believe all this stuff. God is compassionate, and that's a very simple, pure belief. It sits nicely on the human heart, I think.
Do Muslims still believe that Jesus was crucified?
That's a difficult question for me to answer because I'm not a scholar, but when I read the Quran, it suggests to me that the Jews, some Jews who the Quran is, in that passage is criticising the Jews for what some Jews have been doing in speaking evilly of Mary and other things, and then they boasted that they had crucified the Christ. And the Quran says no, they didn't crucify him, but it appeared to them that he had been crucified. And whether or not that means Jesus was crucified or just there was the appearance of what the Jews think they had done is an ambiguity, for me anyway, an ambiguity there, which scholars have had different views of what it actually says. So I don't really know the answer to that question, but whichever way it is, the death of Jesus on the cross, happening or not, has no relevance to God's forgiving nature or God's care for us. It's simply an historical curiosity, if you like. It doesn't change anything.
No, it's just
it's
learning a bit more about the...
Most Muslims will certainly tell you they think the Quran says that Jesus wasn't crucified, although the Quran says it appeared to them that he was crucified. So hence then history records the appearance, but in fact God rescued Jesus in some miraculous way that we don't understand. And so Muslims will believe that on faith because God has said that to them. It's one of those things we just can't verify. We can't go back in a time machine and check it out, unfortunately.
Yeah. Nice, good thing.
Well, yeah, maybe one day.
Sort it out, yeah. All right. Yeah, it's nice talking to you.
And to you, Joseph.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
يا